Hey guys, what's up? It's Michael, and today I thought I would go through some of the books that I've read so far for my English literature degree. So I'm studying in Scotland, which is where I live. Obviously, if you couldn't tell from the accent. I have just finished my second year at uni and I'm going into third. I'm doing a 4-year course. I'm also doing a joint degree with film and television, but obviously this is a book channel, so I thought I would go through some of the books that I've read so far for my English degree. I just remember that when I was applying to do English, I would watch loads of these kind of videos just to see what kind of books I would be reading, and just to see if I could do any like reading beforehand. And yeah, I just think videos like this are kind of useful for people who are looking to study. First up, we have a fairly obvious one, and that is Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Do I really have to say? I really don't know if I'm gonna like say much about the books because like obviously most people are gonna know what they are, but I like Romeo and Juliet. I don't love it. I'm not the biggest fan of Shakespeare in general. I much prefer watching plays, specifically Shakespeare, rather than reading them, because like just why are they so complicated, and like why is the language so complicated? One thing you're going to realise is when I read a classic, and I love a classic, it's a pretty simple classic, or it's just one that I've studied and put more thought into, but sometimes Shakespeare just goes straight over my head. And I'm currently reading If We Were Villains by Emil Rio, which is the secret history but like a Shakespeare version, and most of the Shakespeare bits are going over my head, but I'm enjoying it for the most part. But Romeo and Juliet is, I would say, one of the more accessible Shakespeare plays, and I did quite enjoy my reading experience of it, but studying it, not so much. I'm just not really interested in this kind of play or literature, I suppose. Next up, we have another favourite classic, not of mine but of the general public, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I like Jane Eyre. One thing that I feel is that if I had read the majority of these books outside of a university context, I probably would have enjoyed them a little bit more. But also for some of them, I don't think I would have enjoyed them a little bit more, because I feel like sometimes studying a book either hinders or enhances your experience. I did really enjoy Jane Eyre, however, and this follows Jane, who's an orphan, and then she's sent off to work for Mr. Rochester, I do believe, yes. And it's kind of a love story, but also Rochester's a debatable love interest. He kind of has some monsters in his closet, literally. But yeah, Jane Eyre is a classic for a reason, and I completely understand why this was one that we studied. For a Victorian novel, this novel is quite ahead of its time in terms of its... Oh sorry, you can just see Buddy just rolling around in the background. This novel is fairly forward-thinking in its feminist ideologies, especially for a Victorian novel. So yeah, there is a lot to appreciate for Jane Eyre. Next up, I'm gonna be brutally honest. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens was one absolute snooze fest for me. I maybe just didn't give it enough of a chance, but I listened to this one on audiobook, which was maybe my mistake, and could not tell you a single thing that happens in Great Expectations other than we're following Pip, and we're kind of just following his life story as he comes into money, or he like falls in love. Just, I don't know, maybe I need to try another Charles Dickens, but Great Expectations was just not for me. Victorian novels are kind of a hit or miss for me, I would say, and Jane Eyre kind of worked, whereas Charles Dickens' Great Expectations did not. Next up, we come to the first of a few favourites, and that is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I absolutely love The Crucible. If you did not know, this is a play by Arthur Miller. I don't know if I said that already. But yeah, I love this. It's basically set in Salem, Massachusetts during the witch trials, and it's kind of a fictionalized but also very inspired by real events and real people account of the witch trials and the hysteria going on at the time. You know, you've got Abigail, John Proctor. I absolutely love The Crucible, and I actually studied this in high school as well for drama, and like acted in a few of the scenes. And yeah, this is just such a classic play if you haven't read this. Arthur Miller also writes Death of a Salesman, which is another fairly popular play, but The Crucible is one that I much prefer. Next, we come to one of the most confusing novels I have ever read, and that is The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. I like don't know if I could tell you what this book is about. This is such a satirical novel, and it's very postmodern and very convoluted. We're basically following this woman, Oedipa. She's going to execute a former lover's estate. Do with that what you will. This book literally just feels like being on drugs. It just feels like a complete trip, because you will just be reading sentences and just the most random words, the random things ever will occur. I really can't describe this, but it is very American, very post-war, very postmodernism, as I said. It was a book that I enjoyed, not one that I recall much of, but the experience itself is fun. Don't know if I entirely got much from it though. Next up we have one of my favourites, and that is The Good Soldier by Ford Madox Ford. I've spoke about this in my last video, I'm pretty sure. This is basically like the White Lotus vibes, but it's set in 1915, I'm pretty sure, either during the war or just after the war, or just before the war, I'm not entirely sure. We're basically following the intertwining lives of an English couple and an American couple as they travel around Europe, visiting different towns, historical sites, staying at different hotels, and this one was a roller coaster ride. There is so much drama packed into this little book, and the best part about this for me is its metafictional nature. Metafiction is basically the fact that the book is aware that it is a book, and you know, Dibble, the main character, will make direct references to the novel or the fact that he's writing a book, will talk directly to the reader, but this also brings into question Dibble's reliability, which is something which I really enjoy and love in a reliable narrator. He himself is quite self-aware of the fact that he might not be reliable. He gets the story confused sometimes. He says that he isn't entirely sure what happened, and there are so many theories about this book, one of them being that Dibble is like some sort of criminal mastermind and has orchestrated the full events of the book. It is truly one of my favourite books. Next up we have a book that I really don't know how to describe, and that is Geek Love by Catherine Dunn. This follows a couple who like run a circus, but they inject the wife of the couple with loads of drugs, loads of dodgy things, and they basically have all these like genetically modified babies, and they show them at this circus, and it kind of just follows the destruction of the circus and how all of the kids interact with the parents, with the visitors, with different people who come to the circus, different doctors, and it was a really, really disturbing book. But I don't know, like at the time of reading it, I was really disturbed by it and didn't really like it. But upon reflection, I do really like what the book done, and I just have quite a lot of fond memories of reading it, because the book just feels really profound and quite philosophical to me, and I think that is why, on reflection, I think I enjoyed it more than I did at the time. But yeah, this is just, as you can tell from the cover, this is just a weird book, and I do love me some weird fiction, so yeah, this is a fairly good one. Next up, we come to one of my favourite books of all time, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is my favourite, like, popular classic, I would say. Frankenstein is just, like, iconic to me. If you don't know, where have you been? Living under a rock. This basically follows Dr. Frankenstein, who wants to basically take control of life and make his own human race, or not human I guess, his own like race of people, and he digs up some graves, gets some body parts, and makes a man. And yeah, that calls into question a lot of different things for this creature, and they kind of become aware and they seek vengeance for their own creation, and there's just so much to get from Frankenstein. I feel Mary Shelley as well is just such a remarkable woman. She wrote this when she was 19, and that is just insane to me because I'm 19 and I'm like, I could never write something like this. But yeah, Frankenstein is just truly one of the most remarkable tales I've ever read, and for being Victorian, which is sometimes a little bit iffy for me, this is so accessible to read, but also feels like you're reading a classic, if that makes sense. Like, you feel kind of sophisticated when you're reading it, but it's also very easy to read. But yeah, Frankenstein is just one of the best. Last but not least, we come to a book that I don't need to talk about anymore on my channel. I've literally mentioned this in every single one of my videos so far, and that is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. How do I talk about this book? This is basically one of my favourite books of the year, and it is a memoir where Machado uses this metaphor of the dream house to allow a past abusive relationship to exist and take on lots of different genres and different techniques and different literary ideas. You know, we've got like dream house as unreliable narrator, dream house as fantasy novel, dream house as crime thriller, and this just basically explores a queer abusive relationship in all of its different facets. We have a story that we follow, we kind of follow the timeline of the relationship, but interspersed are some sort of playful topics such as, you know, Disney villains, queer villains, and the paradox that that presents. Should we celebrate queer villains, or does that present harmful stereotypes to the queer community? I don't know, I just loved this book so much, I cannot stop thinking about it. And this is just truly a masterpiece of a memoir. I don't think I'll ever read a book quite like it, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So yes, this brings us to the end of some of the books that I have read for my English degree so far. Obviously I've got 2 years of my course left, so if you would be interested in a follow-up after I finish the degree, gonna drop them, I would be more than happy to do that. One of the main feelings that I have towards this stack of books is that I definitely do prefer the more modern sort of books that we read. Obviously in the Dream House, The Crucible is fairly modern, and then some of the older ones like Great Expectations and, you know, Jane Eyre just don't do it as much for me. Even though I can appreciate what they are and their place in literature, I just personally prefer some of the newer books. But yeah, if you have any questions about these books, or if you have any questions about studying English literature, please let me know down below. I would be more than happy to answer away. But yeah, this is the stack of books I read for my degree so far. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye.